Welcome to today's webinar, Designing Road Diets as a Tool for Walkability and Community Revitalization, hosted by the Maryland Department of Planning in association with the Smart Growth Network. My name is Michael Bayer. I'm the Manager of Infrastructure and Development at the Maryland Department of Planning and Project Manager for the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse. The Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse is a project of the Smart Growth Network, supported by the U.S. EPA's Office of Community Revitalization and managed by the Maryland Department of Planning. In addition to hosting webinars, the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse has a website at smartgrowth.org that provides information on effective growth, development, and preservation practices. The Clearinghouse provides information to help local decision makers foster healthy, resilient, and economically vibrant communities. The Clearinghouse is also the virtual home of the Smart Growth Network, a nationally recognized coalition of leadership organizations that have formally endorsed the principles of smart growth. This webinar is one in a series of webinars produced by the Maryland Department of Planning on smart growth and planning topics available for viewing at smartgrowth.org. You can also find out about planning initiatives, planning tools, and educational opportunities in Maryland by visiting the Maryland Department of Planning's website at planning.maryland.gov. We are recording this webinar and will be posting it on our website under the Webinar Archives tab. We encourage you to visit the website and to subscribe to our e-newsletter to learn about our upcoming webinars. The views expressed by the speaker in this webinar are those of the speaker and not necessarily of the Maryland Department of Planning or the state of Maryland. Viewers of this live event are eligible to receive 1.5 CM credits from the American Planning Association and 1.5 CNUA CEU self-reported credits from the Congress for the New Urbanism. To log your AICP credits, visit the American Planning Association's website at planning.org, log into your account, and search for the name of today's event, which is Designing Road Diets as a Tool for Walkability and Community Revitalization. You can also search for event number 925-2229. So today our speaker is Dan Burton, the Director of Innovation and Inspiration for Blue Zones LLC, who has focused his career on helping the world get back on its feet. He returns here after a webinar on roundabouts that he did with us in May. Dan is a nationally recognized expert on active transportation, livable and sustainable communities, safe streets, safe routes to school enhancements, and bicycle and pedestrian facilities and programs. By inspiring residents, policymakers, planners, and designers to change their built environments to accommodate people, Dan has helped more than 3,800 communities during his more than 40 years of work in the built environment. In 2018, Plan Medicine named him as one of the 100 most influential urbanists of all time. He has earned 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards from the American Association of Pedestrians and Bicycle Professionals and from the New Partners for Smart Growth. The League of American Bicyclists named Dan one of the 25 most significant leaders in bicycling for the past 100 years. Following his presentation, Dan will answer as many questions as time permits. As always, you can submit a question anytime by using the questions tool located in the control panel on the right side of your screen. And thanks to everyone who sent in some questions ahead of time as part of the registration process. So we're going to get started, as we always do, with a couple of quick polls. And the first one is our normal one, which is just asking folks in the audience where you live and work. So we have changed the categories around based on some of the input we've gotten. We're always trying to innovate here. So you can see West, Midwest, South, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and an international, and now we're going to include Canada and Mexico in that category. This is for Dan. Obviously, we know from the registration list where people are from. So, but we do want to share with the presenter and with everyone in the audience today where our audience is today. So if you're having any problems responding to this, you may need to exit from full screen mode, and we'll give you a couple more seconds to respond. And again, thanks for being here today. We'll give you 2 or 3 more seconds, and then we'll share with you where everybody's from. And as usual, there's a nice distribution of the audience. So 30% Mid-Atlantic Northeast, 24% South, 22% Midwest, 17% in the West, and 8% of our audience is international today. And our second question, specific to the topic, is, does your community have a road diet, or are you considering one? And so you can select one of these 4 options. Yes, we have one. Yes, we are considering one. No, or not sure. And again, we'll give you a few seconds to respond to that. And again, thanks for being here. We have a very large crowd today. Give you a few more seconds. And again, the distribution is interesting to see what the final numbers come out as. Okay, so here, 35% yes have one, 24% not sure, 22% yes, we are considering one, and only 18% say no. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Burton and welcome him today. Welcome, Dan. And we need Dan to unmute himself once he gets his PowerPoint in full screen mode. There you are. Oops, you did it. Now there you go.
Okay. So is my voice coming across?
Yes.
Yeah.
You just need to go in full screen mode and we're good.
Good. I'll do that.
Excellent.
All right. Can all you folks see my screen? Okay. I'm assuming so. So this is a presentation I've been working on for a number of months, but actually most of my professional career. Peter Lagerwey from Seattle, he and I wrote the original article titled Road Diets. It's a concept we came up with, although people had been doing road diets many years before. So I'd like to get right into the presentation. I tend to be a visual person. And I'll say, whether or not you check you have a road diet, if you have a multi-lane road in the winter, you've got a road diet. It's amazing how gifted motors are at figuring out they don't want to be that close to another motorist coming the opposing direction. And they'd prefer not to be next to the curb or the trees. So they just naturally create a road diet every blizzard. And it's something worth thinking about as designers, that the motors have preferences when the weather, especially when the weather becomes inclement. There are a number of towns that have put in very successful road diets, and I'll go through a short string of these, starting with Pottstown, Pennsylvania. They work in all size communities that have multi-lane roads. And this is an actual photographic change. Notice the now down to 2 lanes plus the turning lane. And the angled parking, back in angled, it's another tool I totally love. And they were able to get in bike lanes. Bike lanes work with back in angled parking. Think of how much better the motor sees the entire spectrum of traffic heading their way. Farmington, New Mexico also had a main street that needed a bit of love. The speeds were a bit high and all the businesses were depressed a bit. And we created a photomorph during the work that we did for them. And we included 3 roundabouts, but notice we're down to 2 lanes, a wide buffer for the parking, and a skewed roundabout. This got built. It's been on the ground for a year now and a phenomenal success. Greenville, South Carolina, one of my favorite road diets in the nation. After then mayor, and I'm blanking out on his last name, came back from Europe, he chose to retool his main street. Beautiful angled parking. When you have parking, and especially angled parking, motors tend to slow down. The ideal speed for any downtown is about 18 or 19 miles per hour. They achieve that. Notice all the greening. I'll go back just to show how much more green is available, although this was off season and the trees aren't shown. Grand Junction, Colorado, back when I was still in high school, did their road diet. This is the before. And so 1962, they did all the plannings. They skewed their street as they go through. So there's no reason that you have to keep the streets straight. In this case, it showcases the green and is a further tool for slowing down traffic. University Avenue in Palo Alto was 4 lanes. And the question I'm going to ask real quickly, does anyone taking part today know which US president laid out this street? It was a US president that laid it out. If you know your president's background, you'll probably figure out quickly. And if you can just put it in the chat box, we'll see if anyone really knows. And by the end of the presentation, I'll give out the answer, but it was a US president. Notice this is skewed. You got angled parking on one side, parallel on the other. At the next block, it shifts, and this creates a slight skew, which further keeps traffic at a proper speed. I believe they have around 15,000 cars per day in 2 lanes. This 5-lane road in West Palm Beach became this street. Ian Lockwood was the engineer, planner supporting the engineer, but he is an engineer. Notice we're nearly a 70-foot width right away is now down to the curb to curb. Very effective. This includes a raised intersection. This intersection is raised. 2 of the most studied road diets in the country, East Boulevard in Charlotte, North Carolina, very well done. This was built in 3 stages. I got to work on the early planning of this. Notice the first phase before and after. They've now completed all 3 phases, and very, very successful project. Avon, Colorado, in the upper left photo, you can see they had a 5-lane road at one time. You can see some of the old markings. By the time we got to Avon to work with them, they had already put in the road diet, but the lower 2 photos show the examples we gave them of what they could do. If they wanted to maximize parking, to use the lower left, in this case, it called for a roundabout. And again, notice it's back end angled that we recommended to them. On the right, it's a different model with the bike lanes, protected bike lanes set to the back of the cars. And this concept brings the speed down and allows them to build the buildings that they seek in downtown Avon. I want to, in this presentation, use the second name for a road diet, which is repurposing a street, and broaden what this presentation is about. It's not just taking out lanes, it's coming up with better dimensions overall for a street to reduce the amount of visual ugliness and make it into a beautiful place. Victor Dover and Ken Garcia worked on that project, and it's completed. And it's a beautiful repurposed street. And again, I want to broaden the term of a road diet for this presentation today. Another project that was very well studied is the Edgewater Drive project in Orlando, a little community called College Park. And it was to be a resurfacing project, and the community wanted to do a road diet. And the Florida DOT said, if you take over the street and it becomes your street, then you can do that. We'll give you permission. And there was a lot of discussion about this, but very successful, very well studied. And we're going to show some of the results later in this presentation. Another one of my favorites is in Naples, Florida, Central Avenue. And from this, you see locationally where we are in the 4 lanes. Notice the 4 lanes are needed just to stack the traffic. The lower section, you'll see in a second, is now a roundabout, so they can now justify getting rid of the 4 lanes. So this is the concept. Later in the presentation, we'll talk about intersections, but I wanted to point out that one reason we have 4 lanes is just to stack enough cars for the inefficiency of traffic signals. So roundabouts and road diets are a great partner together. This brings us up to why road diets. Federal Highway Administration has this beautiful explanation. The primary benefit is to improve safety, and it's significant how much safety gain there is. We'll get into that in detail. But there are many other benefits, and so we're going to cover economic and lifestyle and multimodal highways. But there's so many reasons now to look at taking what were once fat and unsafe roads and making them safe again. So it's kind of an outline of today's topic. I want to cover the myths fairly quickly, then get into what the results are in detail, and then the safety and capacity, economics, and then about the emergency response, freight, all of who can benefit from road diets, and then get into the details. If you're going to do them, you may want to look at your intersections a bit different. And now some of the opportunities for mid-block crossings. And but if you're going to do them, you've got to have a very good engagement process, as I think many people have come to understand. Also show some best practices and some variations. So with that, here are the myths. These may not be all of them, but they will divert traffic? No, they don't. People have a reason to be on the street they're on. It's the most efficient. They find it gives them the greatest benefit. Rare number of motorists decide a different route as a result of a road diet. Will it slow people down? It will, and that's one of the things we're trying to do, to get rid of the top end speeders and bring everyone back down to a safe and a prudent level. And we'll talk a little bit why that occurs. The public does not support road diets, not at first, because they don't understand the concepts, but we're going to get into that in today's presentation. If you remove a travel lane, then traffic will back up. Rare. Engineers don't want to make mistakes. They won't do a road diet unless the numbers are convincing. Road diets hurt local business? Just the opposite. They can give a great boost to business. They're too narrow for large vehicles? No, I'm going to show you some pretty narrow ones, and you're going to be pretty impressed of how well large vehicles handle the road. Road diets delay emergency responders. Turns out they do not. In fact, you'll see some combinations of reasons why they either keep it the same or some cases will improve response times. And they're not good for freight? No, they're very good for freight. We've got plenty of great examples of that. So here's why road diets work. The prudent driver sets the speed, especially if we're talking about a 4-lane down to a 2-lane plus turn lane. Now only the prudent driver can set the speed, and they're pretty good about matching the speed that the road intends the driver to drive. It reduces the actual number of crash points from a 4-lane down to a 2-lane plus the center lane. If you add the center lane, there's a dramatic reduction in crash points. Increased retail, social life, and active transportation. These all are a bonus. They really go up, and it's one of the prime reasons why I got into promoting road diets. Increased place for street beautification and greening. The road's visually tighter. It really is. We'll go through a series to show that. More efficient use of pavement. Increased parking. That can be a huge bonus, certainly in a commercial district. Lanes are often reduced in width. My preference is 10 foot, unless you can justify why you need it wider, and then increase sight lines, increase turn radius. So many benefits, and this is only a partial list. So here's a street in Florida where a lot of the hotels and so on for the theme parks is located. Miles were between signalized intersections, so the pedestrians are really at risk here, and especially at night, a high crash rate. One of the other myths is that you'll divert traffic. So this one's a really cool story where once the road diet went in, even though it was going to be faster and easier if a person diverted to the two parallel streets that would carry traffic, a vast majority of motors stayed right on the center road because it was more beautiful, more attractive, more functional, and just a better choice. So I like to use Delray Beach as learning as a good example. The other big reason, of course, for using road diets is just all the benefits for active transportation. The game has changed. It used to be all about how much traffic can you shove through a community. Now it's how can you build a community where people want to live, shop locally, and all of these benefits are accrued when we look at getting the right size road diet on the ground. Notice the 50-50 ratio on this photo. We'll get into more detail. I'm going to use this photo later to show that, but the motor shouldn't have more than 50% of the curb to curb. More than 50. The curb to curb space shouldn't be more than 50% of the total space between the buildings. I once was doing a project in Orange Beach, Alabama. This was their street. Notice it is only 3 lanes, but they have hurricane relief issues, so they wanted to widen the street. So I quickly, that day while I was there, did a photomorph. This is the same photo. I just added in the 2 additional lanes. And there was a gasp, including the traffic engineer, when she saw what the impact was going to be visually. And then I said, well, look, you don't have to have this. And so I had my photomorph specialist, Todd Clemens, create a really authentic rendition of what it would be, because roundabouts will carry 30 to 50% more traffic. They could handle the additional load during a hurricane relief. So others, just use as an example, Sioux City, Iowa had 6 lanes plus their turn lanes. And after realizing the problem they had with that area, they are now going to drop 2 lanes and go down to 4, plus the median with turn lanes. So you can see the added greening, the added beauty. Lake Oswego is just one of the most dynamic places in Oregon now, as a result of their principal road now being very green. I think it's also important to point out that when we're looking at streets, we should be looking at what is the purpose of the street. What is this node, this entire greater area, what does it want to become? And that should be what drives our decision-making tool. One of my ultimate favorites for a roundabout, and it's very well known today, we were looking at La Jolla Boulevard, which was 5 lanes, and speeds were exotic. They were way high, but it had a very high traffic number, 23,000 vehicles per day. So we really had to do our math and make sure that it would work. We found out it would with single lane roundabouts, and we'll get into detail. So here's the road before. I believe they had 6 or 7 signals and then a couple 4-way stops along the corridor. And we I'll show you the morph here. In this case, this is an actual, well, it's not a morph, it's the final. And notice we were able to get angled parking in on one side of the street, so we added more parking and parallel parking. The speeds now are down to 19 miles per hour as opposed to 35 and even up to 45. And here's the cool thing, because we took out all the stops, the motors are getting home sooner. And so at a much lower, much safer, much more retail friendly and people friendly, this is really working. Again, a different section of La Jolla Boulevard, you can see what it was and then what it became. Huge number of people now ride this for pleasure as bicyclists. Far more people are now coming down for businesses. You can see the difference in dimensions. It used to be 68 feet curb to curb, now down to the pedestrian only has to cross 14 feet at a time. The motors yield because of driving so slow. And so the pedestrians are not slowing down the motors just to get across the street, which they would have had to do with the signal set up, even if there were no motors waiting to get on the street. It was the pedestrians that were calling in the signals that would pause. And now new businesses are settling in, including some pretty high scale businesses like the Long's Pharmacy. The owner said they would not have come here without the road diet and the roundabout. So the litmus test I think we should be using when you consider a road diet is the change you're going to make. Will it add to the carrying out the value of your community and reward that short trip and promote active transportation? That's exactly what La Jolla Boulevard did. A couple of others that are very noteworthy. In smaller towns, population 20,000, Muscatine, Iowa, had this street. You can see there's hardly any traffic at all because they did build another road further out. But the road, all that pavement was creating a serious problem. And so pretty much what you see here was built. We went down to 2 lanes, we used raised intersections to control the speed of vehicles. Then another one, this one in Albert Lee, a Blue Zone community. Look up Blue Zone in your spare time and see what the organization is all about. But the state of Minnesota did not want to do a road diet, and the community was really together. And they said, no, then just go somewhere else and repave your road. We don't want it to be made the same. Well, in the end, Minnesota said, okay, we'll do it. They did. And a 73% reduction in crashes. So when I see the official count of reductions of 21% to 47%, there are just so many good examples we have today of where we're getting very high numbers in reduction in crashes, and especially severe crashes. We were able to get in angled parking and really help set the stage for Main Street to move further out. The roundabout has yet to be built. It takes longer to fund, but the road diet was just really repaving the street and putting the paint down somewhere else. So what are the details? When we do a diet, this was formerly 4 lanes. Now notice we got a wider buffer to the pedestrian. And so we're improving walking. We now have an edge with the bike lane. So we've got more turning radius for the motorists to get in and out of the street. We got improved sight lines. And this again is my recommendation, go down to 10-foot lanes and give yourself more space for the bike lanes or whatever other features you're wishing to add. Another example, this one in Sacramento. Again, notice that the narrow travel lanes, they did something pretty cool here. They not only greened the street, but they were able to put in a visual terminus and really made this on purpose a very slow speed street. So what are the results? This has been very well documented. And again, I mentioned that Edgewater Drive has been very well studied. I'll go through each of these, but the crash rate declined 34%. The injury rate, 68%. And again, I think we should be looking at our crash reductions, not just the raw number, but how much do injuries go down, and record that with your road diet when you create one. The parking use went up. People found it easier to get in and out of parking. That helped businesses profoundly. And number of pedestrians noticed this increase. This was just a short while after they put it in. The chances are very likely that this percentage has increased even more dramatically over a longer period of time. Number of bicyclists went up. And again, these are all things that we feel you should be measuring when you do your road diet. Let's get into the safety a little further. Seattle's probably done the best job of recording the number of changes, the ADT before and after. Look how close they are. They've gone up a little bit in traffic, again, proving that traffic does not divert. It has a reason to be there. But look at the collision reductions, 58%, 49%, 61%, 60%. It's very amazing to see this result. Now, why? Well, on a 4-lane road, a motorist who's going to turn left, who's slowing down, is a high candidate for a rear end crash. In fact, that's the highest number of crashes in a 4-lane. And so this is what motorists have to do when that occurs. Notice that the motorist in the blue car is now in conflict with the motorist in the yellow car. Likewise, if the motorist is turning left, what the pattern is, the motorist in the red car on the right is creating a screen so that the motorist making that left may not see. And this is a horrible type of crash. That crash cannot occur when you have a road diet. Mountain View put in this road diet at a school, and notice when you're queuing to turn left into the school, that puts you at a very high risk. In fact, this one's on a downhill slope. So by doing the road diet and creating that turn lane pocket, it became a much safer location. Let's talk a little bit about the capacity issue. The interesting thing is Kirkland, Washington, which back then had 3 road diets already in a fairly small town, they realized they had problems with all their driveways with a 4-lane. And so when they went to a 3-lane, it opened up the sight lines and it gave people places to enter safely. But because they closed down a parallel street for some other construction, it jumped these numbers clear up to 30,000 vehicles per day, and it worked. So what is the upper range of road diet? Well, again, with prudence, 20,000 is where we often recommend, but we've proven that you can get up to 23,000, and Kirkland has produced that in rare cases, you could get up to 30,000. They had some dynamics that would allow that to occur, but I want to justify that people are looking at going above 15,000 or whatever. There's a lot of rationale now about how highly competent engineers can do all the modeling and formulas and figure out which ones will work and which ones are going to need to keep all of their lanes. So these are the ones in Kirkland. The one that goes up and connects with the freeway, when that was 4 lanes, a pedestrian would never make it across the street. Now they're able to get in the mid-block crossing, and traffic moves a bit slower, and yet it stays steady. Let's now talk about efficiency. The road diet here used to be 3 lanes, went down to 2, and the lanes were narrowed to 10 feet, And I'm going to show the intersection because here you're going to gain another benefit of fewer lanes. At a signal, they used to have 36 feet plus some added radius. So the pedestrian we had to set the signals for the pedestrian for over 40 feet. And now, because they were able to get in a tighter radius, drop out a full lane, the signals for the pedestrian can be much shorter, and therefore you can increase capacity per lane with a road diet, especially when you design your intersections correctly. Economic benefits. This is again one of my favorites. The economics of road diets is really anchored in today, people waking up and realizing if we're going to live in communities, let's have them be livable and create those kinds of streets where they're walkable, they're retail friendly, that we have people having more mode choices. And so there's so many reasons why today city administrators and planners and engineers are all saying enough is enough. We don't need big, wide, fat roads that are going to emphasize regional flow. We really need to be focusing on how do we get people to take fewer trips by having real place for them to go to. Probably the best example of this is Lancaster, California. It used to be 5 lanes right through the heart of their downtown. The lower photo is what they built. Notice they used angled parking in the center of the street from both sides. It's a pretty unique pattern, and it left open the visual lines to the buildings. You can see it in more depth and detail here. The average speed today is below 19. Each time I've driven it during heavy uses, the speeds are down closer to 12 miles per hour, which is just perfect. Also on the economic effects, New York City has learned that it's the bicyclists and the pedestrians, the people who get out of their cars, who are going to benefit the retail life of their streets. Notice the 49% increase in retail trade after this road diet went in. Michael Ronkin beautifully laid this out for us before he retired from the Oregon DOT. Notice if you take a standard 4-lane road with 12-foot lanes and now drop out a lane, you can add the parking and the bike lane and narrow the lanes and get the parking, or keep the lanes a little wider and now get in the bike lane. This obviously is a one-way street, and then wider systems. Michael has another section where he shows with the road diet how you change the wear pattern of cars and allow the same road to handle more life between maintenance cycles. So pretty cool. Road diets don't have to be that expensive. This one was done very affordably. All they did was laid, and they wanted the median, by the way. All they did was laid extruded curbing for the paving, and then backfilled it with river wash. Pretty cool. And again, brought down the speeds, achieved their quest. Now let's get into the details for emergency responders and freight. One example I like to give is Manitou Springs. Notice the small fire apparatus sitting out in the street while they're cleaning the firehouse. It's pretty amazing. I've got another photo which I couldn't quite find in a hurry that shows them going through the intersection by using that 3rd lane and going across the face of the many roundabout. Now let's show another use of a roundabout. This is a visual I showed in my roundabouts, but I want to show it again because it applies here. Now, if that had been a signalized intersection, or
explanation here, the fire
get past that. If that had been a signalized intersection, by law and by prudence, the fire responder needed to come to a complete stop before entering the intersection. And there are just so many ways you can use the third lane to get around stalled traffic. So there are just so many benefits to the emergency responder when you get that third lane in, as opposed to the 4 lanes. Santa Cruz, a little more detail here. You can again see the benefits of a more compact street and intersection, even though the curb to curb face is basically still the same. They were able to get in parking and the bike lanes and a wider buffer. Let's now get into the details for the intersections. Notice that with St. George Street in Toronto, that used to be 4 lanes. It is basically a 4-to-2 conversion, but then adding in the turning pockets at the intersections. It's the intersection that decides whether or not you can get up to 15,000, 18,000, 23,000. The more intersections you have and the less energy you put into designing the intersection for effective movement, the lower your numbers are going to be. But they did a beautiful job. Notice these are compact intersections, 10-foot lanes, and then no, don't make anything wider than it needs to be. Keep the signal cycles short and efficient and effective. You'll see that before they did the road diet, I wasn't able to pull up a before photo, but before they had 1,800 vehicles per hour per lane, and after the same. But at the intersection, they have to add in an additional turning movement in order to keep that efficient. So truly everything is about the intersection. And so a good designer will understand that, obviously, and allow you to have road diet where if it wasn't done correctly, you just couldn't lose lanes. Notice now what they picked up. They've got a beautiful green, wider sidewalks, and bike lanes as a result of the road diet. Again, it's a 4-to-2 conversion, but then they add back that space at key intersections. Also from the roundabouts presentation we did, just an explanation, when you build an intersection and you're really topping out your numbers, say you get up around 25,000 vehicles a day, you can still do it in 2 lanes, but you've got to widen the intersections. But if you add the roundabout, and again, it's all based on loading factors, you can not have to add lanes and therefore make it very friendly for people to be on foot. We can show that in Maui. They had programmed the street on the left to have an overpass to get the pedestrian completely out of the picture. That would have been about 14 grand, and the pedestrian wouldn't have done it. So we showed them how they could do a protected bike lane intersection treatment, and now spend less money and get far more benefit of using the roundabout as opposed to an overpass to get the pedestrian out of the picture. Another example I like to give is Hamburg, New York. Did all the key streets through their town at once. And these are essentially, if you go from paint to paint, these are 9-foot lanes. And we put in what we call just buffer lanes for the parking. They're not wide enough to be a bike lane, but this is a major truck route. I believe in all there are 5 roundabouts, but the narrow lanes, and you can see the benefit to the pedestrian now, not having to wait for a signal cycle, being able to get across the street. And notice the third motorist back already realizing, wow, there's no place for me to go. They open up the closing or the crossing for the pedestrian, and it's a really effective process. And no delay to the motorist with an efficient roundabout. And again, you can see it. Here's a big truck parked or stopped on the street, and another vehicle, again, the big semi, in what is essentially is from paint to paint, a 9-foot lane. And truckers love the lane width and full treatment with the roundabout because it really works to keep them in motion. They don't have to stop. Another great design, this one I think was done by Michael Mull, one of my favorite engineers. This is the street before, Asheville, North Carolina. What you see further downstream was essentially a 5-lane road, impossible for a pedestrian to cross. It was rebuilt. And again, the roundabout was the key in this case. And notice we were able to take it down to 1 lane in each direction, add in more parking, and slow the speed of the street down. So let's now talk about mid-block tools. In Santa Cruz, again, the ability to drop in crossing islands, huge benefit for pedestrians when you do a road diet, go from 4 to 3. You wouldn't be able to do that if you kept 4. But we also like to add in a Z shape. That is, you skew the mid crossing point, gives you more storage space, slows down the pedestrian from trying to run across, and gives them a purposeful direction to be looking for traffic. In Asheville, this is the actual remade street road diet. Again, that would have been 4 lanes, 5 as you talk about the turning movements. Look how much safer and easier it is for the pedestrian to get across the street. Another Z, this one in a road diet in Olympia, Washington. And again, some of the details for doing the crossing islands, they were very good about keeping the space open for the driveways. And again, visually slowing the traffic and making it much safer, much easier for the pedestrian to get across the street. There are a few other applications for road diets I'd like to point out. And there's just a huge variety of these. I can only show you some of them. First of all, there are cases where you need to build the 4 lanes. Notice they did this with a nice boulevard style treatment into a neighborhood. But immediately they said, well, wait a minute, it's going to be a long time before we need 4 lanes. Let's mark in buffered bike lanes, which they did. And perhaps they can go 10 years or 15 years, or maybe never need to open it up as a 4-lane road, and yet they get their beautiful boulevard style treatment. In Clearwater, Florida, the road diet they did on Cleveland Avenue, I believe it is, they were able to further reduce the top end speeding, not just with the road diet, but also to make the road feel narrower by using other materials in the center turning spaces. And now we get back to the Sacramento treatment. You could colorize the outer bike lanes as well. So these are all treatments that will also help bring down the speeds and therefore the crashes. I've always been a strong proponent of back and angle parking. Here's a street that during my first visit, they chose to keep all the lanes, but later Caltrans, California DOT essentially, chose to go with the ideas, and they then went down to 1 lane in each direction and more than outperformed the street before when it was 5 lanes. One-way streets have unique opportunities. In Batesville, Arkansas, we were looking at this street, which was a 1-way on the left, at going back to 2-way. It's something we often recommend to bring the speeds down and to make a road much safer, easier access. But after studying it, we realized there was a good parallel street. Let's skew the street, take it down to a single lane, and then put in the skew at each intersection. They built it, and boy, has it ever helped bring back the business life to Batesville, Arkansas. So different things you can do with 1-way streets. Or Portland has a lot of 1-way streets, and they really have built a good system using them. And again, I'm not in favor of 1-ways, but there are reasons why you want them in some cases. But notice they took out a lane, built in the buffered bike lane with the added space, and then when they get to the intersection, for efficiency reasons, they add back a lane, as you see they've done here. Also in Portland, in the Lloyd district, they were able to take out a full lane. I think it had been up to 4 lanes as a one-way, and they took out one, and this really brought the street life back, and added parking, added the bike lane in that treatment. One that I just discovered 2 days ago in Missoula, Montana. This is a road for about 5/8 of a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile, is a one-way, and has reasons to be. What they did is they took it down to a single lane, and now it's a bicycle lane on the right, and it's a shared lane on the left, and the speeds came down pretty well. The people who live along the street really like how quiet and how pleasant it is. So it's still one way, but it's two-way for the bicyclist. Now let's get to the very important, essential part of this presentation. A lot of people just don't know what a road diet is and why they would want one. Just came across this today, that this particular street needs or has the opportunity to be dieted, and there's a lot of pushback. But here are some of the many reasons why they should want to go ahead with the diet. Huge number of crashes, and even though they point out that the majority of the crashes are at intersections, well, one reason they're higher than they should be at intersections is people are going too fast. If you do the diet and bring the speeds down to a more appropriate level, then there are very likely going to be fewer crashes at the intersections where you get the people crossing into another. But here's what we've learned. And again, we did every neighborhood in Clearwater, Florida, only a few road diets, but all the traffic calming. We were able, by working with the leaders in the neighborhood, to get a 99% approval rate, and I believe that extended out to Cleveland Avenue, which I've just shown you. An amazing, beautiful story to go with this one. The woman you see in the center, a child had been killed in the street right in front of her house. So she went out and grabbed this can and walked around the neighborhood and collected several $1,000s that same afternoon, and went to the city. The city said, well, we'll match that. They did. And then they called me up and asked if we could lower our rates, which we did. And I can't remember how much the whole process was. For about 10 grand total, they were able to get a Tiger grant and rebuild all the streets in their neighborhood. And one of them was a significant road diet. Why is it so important to engage the neighborhood? Have them become the responsible leaders. First of all, they have more to lose and more to gain if you do something right. So we work to develop ownership in the neighborhood. It's a very effective process which we label informed consent. Once people become informed about what the issues are with road diets, then they're very likely to be the strong proponents, as opposed to someone as an outsider making the suggestion. So a state, even if they own the road, they're the outsider. It's always important to get that leadership in the community. And that's exactly what Seattle has done. They're up to over 35 road diets, I believe, at this stage. But here's the critical element. If you're going to do a road diet, maybe it's just done by policy up to a certain number. Maybe that number can be as high as 12,000. But you reach a point where you have to do a study and prove that it's going to work. So if, say, you have 15,000 vehicles per day, then you probably want to do that analysis and the public involvement. 18,000 for sure public involvement. And again, you're going to have to add additional tools. Notice when we get up to 21,000, we do a very different treatment of crossings and making sure we've got the gaps and the steady flow. And this is where the top engineers who have been performing road diets really come out well. You can do a road diet on a multiple lane road when you have to have 4 lanes, but in this case, the numbers again really need to be featured. So you go from 7 lanes down to 5, or to 4 plus median boulevard style treatments. Again, with public engagement, the key is to get the public engaged, to get everyone to understand. When I work in a community, I love to do walking audits. In some include bicycling audits, but it's amazing the transformations we get when we work directly with the community. Now, once the public engagement has completed, there are things you can do to prove that certain elements work, but Michael Leiden, I believe, did a presentation just on tactical urbanism, which you can access through the Maryland Smart Growth Network. Another example, again, getting the intersections more compact or creating public space. These are all treatments that Seattle's been using very successfully. And here it says they've done at least 425 road diets, but I believe they're clear up to 30. And there are some of the most recent, the volumes that they're addressing are up into the 20,000s. One I'm aware of is 23,000. They may be even a little bit higher on one of the others. And again, it's all done through science. It's all something you know that the outcome's going to be before you do it. I love this particular diet. Notice it's on a hilly terrain. Look at the buffer to the sidewalk as a result of going from 4 lanes. Before, the cars were right snug up against the sidewalk. Turns were difficult. Sight lines were very harsh. And now the pedestrians have a nice buffer, as you can see. So many benefits just on this one particular road diet in Seattle. In Venice, Florida, they were able, when they did this diet, to capture all that space for a buffer plus the bike lane. You can see the beauty they were able to add in Victoria at 40 kilometers per hour. Honolulu, buffer bike lane. Again, this had been 4. And even the bus fits beautifully in a 10-foot lane. If you can add in the buffer, their issues go away. Another road in Honolulu, again, they were able to keep the center lane to handle all the turning movements in residential driveways and so on. Very efficient. One of my favorites locally, I live in Port Townsend, but Sequim, I just love the street, but notice each side's a little different. They were able to do the setbacks on the left and the right here, but up close, they weren't able to acquire the right of way to set back the sidewalk. Road diet conversions to protected bike lanes. Again, in this case, they moved the parking out. This one in Missoula, Montana. And again, I love doing the forensics and seeing the old markings and so on. Again, in Edgewater, East Lansing, pretty high numbers on this particular road, Grand River. And again, the buffer, sorry about that replication. San Francisco has been successful using dedicated bus lanes. I'm going to make a move later in the presentation that maybe we do slow lanes. The outer lane, if you're going to stick with the multi-lane highway, that the slow lane now has a reduced speed. That can be the subject of a totally different presentation. This road diet in Fort Lauderdale by the sea. And now to get into best practices. Again, extending the meaning of a road diet. This particular road, from what was on the left to what's on the right, I think you can see a dramatic engagement of people. This dramatically increased the value of all the properties. Another treatment using the colorized center lane, again, helps define the street for a different purpose. And now some of my heroes. Nina Schlossberg realized that her principal street, Hillsborough, was then listed as the most dangerous street in North Carolina. It was the town gown connector. And as a result of her work, you can see it here, the street before and the street after. There's been close to $500 million of new investing to the street. It's now considered one of the safest streets in the state from one of the most dangerous prior to that. Lancaster, again, you can see the transition, kind of the middle upper road to the street the way it is today. And finally, I just want to close out with a few other leaders of, in this particular case, Doug Bryce realized that his county wanted to widen the road from 4 lanes to 6. And he said, do you have the money for that? And they said, yes. He said, good, we're going to go down to 2. He knew his science. The street has to carry 18,000 vehicles per day. You can see the transition now. They were now all the quality homes on Rochester and all the things they were able to do. They created what's called the Art Walk, and really brought a lot of really good quality changes. So these are video references. When we do the PDF version of this, I hope these are, you can just click and go away, but there's so many references now for road diets that I just stayed with the ones that are really good quality video productions, which you can see here. And then I think I'm ready to turn it over to you, Michael and John. And thanks everyone for allowing me to do this presentation.
Thanks, John. And Dan. John
And
just mentioned to me,
right? What do I need to click?
you just need to click your camera, turn the camera on. So we have there with you there. And did you have another slide that had your contact information, Dan?
I do. It's one forward.
Okay. Well, we put your contact information on the slide as well here, including your phone number. And Dan is one of the few presenters who will share his number, so you can call him directly if you're interested in talking with him, as well as interacting here with all the questions that have come in. And thanks everyone for submitting them. We actually got almost 100 of them coming into the program today. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. We might go over a couple minutes if Dan has a little extra time for us. But I'll just start here and we'll just dig in. How about that?
Let's do it.
Excellent. So the first one here is from Marion X, who has a little comment before the question, which is, I'm curious about projects or examples in a more suburban or rural context to reduce the level of service and slow traffic, as well as possibly provide pedestrian infrastructure that might be missing. What does this look like if there are not complete connections to neighborhoods and so on? Does pedestrian or bike traffic increase if there's a last mile problem for them to safely get back home from a major street?
When we look at bicycling and walking, we're really looking at completing this whole trip, right? And so yes, the suburban context is where we get some of the most dramatic results. And again, it's all in the numbers. If it can work, not only does it work for a tightly urbanized area, it works really well for a suburban area. In fact, at least half of my examples are suburban in context. Go with the main streets first because you get the huge payout that way. But people live in the suburbs and they need to get across the streets there. And if we're especially going to convert strip centers to mixed-use villages, we have to give strong consideration to getting people back and forth across the street. Park once and a lot. Sadly, so many of the suburban streets were overly built just to handle volume and capacity that there are so many opportunities now to bring them back to the right scale.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Next one here's from Catherine Windick, who asks, when roundabouts are used, are separated bike lanes recommended? And do you know if bicyclists tend to enter the roundabout without separated lanes?
No intersection should have a bike lane marked through it. And that applies both to signals and to roundabouts. We always give an option to flow around the roundabout using a specially dedicated outer multi-use trail area. But a really well-designed roundabout, we're bringing the speed down to about 15 to 18 miles per hour. Skilled bicyclists prefer to stay in the lane, and we always want them to take that option as opposed to going around in a separate space. Hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I've got a lot of questions in this realm, and that is, and here's one example. Why are you so encouraging of back-in angled parking?
It's the safest way to park. You know, you think about it one way or the other. You feel like you've got visual issues, but if you back in, you already control the traffic, and so you back straight in. Trunk's where you want it to be. When you open the car doors, you're sending your children back to safety. When you go to pull out, you can see everything, and so it's clearly the safest way you can park, and it allows us to have bike lanes if that's a choice. Oh yeah, I do a whole presentation on the values and the benefits of back and angled parking. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Oh, by the way, for your question earlier about which president designed that street, I'll just give you some of the answers. I think the actual answer was the most popular, but beyond that, Eisenhower, Reagan, Wilson, and Zachary Taylor were actually suggested. But do you want to tell everybody who it was?
Herbert Hoover, who was an engineer. Yeah.
Yes, a number of people figured that out and remembered that fact about him as well. Excellent. Okay, we'll go back into the questions here. And the next one is from Tricia Faught, who asks, do you have any suggestions for urban roadways that are currently 4 lanes, but only 40-foot curb to curb in older areas of town where we have many driveways and side streets?
Well, that's a great example of where a road diet, you know, we pushed the road to a maximum with 4 lanes, 10-foot lanes, and no sight lines or no forgiveness. That would be a first candidate for a road diet. You can get down to, let's just use some numbers, a 10-foot turn lane. That's all you need if you get the speeds appropriate. And then 2 10-foot lanes. So now you're left with 10 feet. You can split that, 5 foot on either side. That's a little shy of putting in official bike lanes, but that is still a benefit to everyone. It's a buffer for pedestrians. It is a better space for bicyclists. It does bring down the speeds. We built quite a few road diets with 10, 10, and 10, and they seem to work quite well. First of all, bringing the speeds down to an appropriate level, but really opening up the sight lines and the turning radii in and out of driveways, in and out of side streets.
Great. Next one here is from Jason Prescott, who says, what are the methods for making the center dual turn lanes safer? I'm surprised to see so many of these on road diets.
Well, yeah, the engineers went to the 3rd lane because it really was a good solution for reducing crashes. What they did that probably is not as good is on 4-lane roads already added that 5th lane. And again, it brought down crashes, but it they'd be much better off with a boulevard street where they put in the turning pocket. There are just so many abuses of that 5th lane that when we can convert a street to a true boulevard style, it's just so much safer. In fact, the Australians came over to study it when we first did it. I got to meet the guy who came up with the idea. He's now in his 90s. and he's so proud of it. But boy, Australia and countries that have far safer roads than we do came over to study it, and they just shook their heads and went back and promised they would never do anything like that again, or they wouldn't do it. And so they've become a much safer country for road safety. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Next one here is from Brett Wenger, who asks, what level of traffic analysis do you need to do before making a recommendation to do a road diet? Specifically in higher or borderline volumes, what traffic methods do you normally use to examine intersection configuration?
Well, sure. The main thing is with the higher volumes to know what your peaks are, and the peak hour and so on. And again, as correctly assumed here, it is the intersections. And if you got peaks that are just going to go above the numbers, then that means you've really got to go to a better intersection tool. Either you add in the missing lanes for turning movements and so on, or a roundabout, which again gives you a huge boost in proficiency and so on. There are a lot of road diets we just wouldn't have done if we didn't consider several roundabouts. It just would have made the intersections too wide. But all the modeling tools that are available to the engineering community will give really precise information on what works and what does not. And again, the Australians developed the science behind doing that modeling. So good use of the modeling tools will prove what your level service will be, and you can even project some added growth in traffic and what it would be with that projection. It's a very great system.
Thanks, Dan. We did get several questions about cost of this approach, so I'll ask this specific one here, and we may get into others. What about the financial cost of retrofitting streets via road diets? In your experience, how receptive are municipalities to implementing the road diets once they know the total cost?
Well, it depends. It depends on if you're going to do a roadway resurfacing. You just put the paint down somewhere else. You're actually getting the road diet for free, or at a very low cost. You are probably using a little more paint when you do a road diet, but that's a fairly affordable side. Once you can schedule the additional projects like mid-block crossings, mid-block crossings don't interrupt drainage, so those can come in at a very affordable rate. If you're going to now add parking, curb extensions, then all that can be scheduled, but it doesn't have to be done concurrent with the first level of the road diet. That can be something that comes later. There's a slight cost to scrubbing out the old lines if the lines are pretty prominent. I've watched Seattle do that treatment, and but overall, the cost of a road diet are so affordable. And again, you can schedule some of the other enhancements to the road diet downstream after you can budget for it and so on. And again, even your crossing islands are highly affordable just simply because they don't affect drainage whatsoever.
Thanks, Dan. Next one here is from Heather Saylor, who says, there were a lot of variations and examples in the program of where bike lanes could be placed as part of a road diet, especially in relation to parking. What methodology is used for bike lane placement and when it needs a barrier?
Well, bicyclists who are competent only really are about 7% of the total population of the US, 7% of people who bike or would bike. Over 50% of people would bike, of the US population would bike if we protected them or gave them more separation than what we've been doing recently. So huge gains to be made if we can create that buffer or border width and other enhancements. So we like to give that strong consideration when we're trying to increase overall bicycling in the community, especially on our principal roads.
Thanks, Dan. Next one is from Ruth Hamburg, who says, you didn't mention the role of street trees in road diets, but I know they are a key tool to slow traffic. Yet there's little room provided in the right-of-way for route space in some of the examples you showed. Can you elaborate?
Yes, we're going to do a whole presentation on urban street trees, their role, and we haven't scheduled that yet, but it's one of my favorite topics. There'll be multiple presenters for that one. But the science of urban street trees is very significant. We're learning more and more about how to deal with the root structure, to what species selections will work in certain climatic zones and so on. So there are some streets in Seattle, as an example, where even a 2 or a 3 foot space separating the sidewalk and the street with a nature strip, they've gotten the trees to work really well. And again, it's all about selecting species, using the right landscape architectural materials now, the way they get planted and the way they get cared for in the early years. We can now do it, but boy, am I ever a strong proponent of getting in trees on the edges, and when we can, with that third lane or the third lane converted in the middle to a boulevard, boy, does that ever green up our streets, cool the streets. With some species of trees, the ones that like to broaden out, have a dramatic effect on heat and other effects, and all the great benefits of trees with transpiration, cooling the air around the street, and minimizing the harm that we come up with when we have nothing but pavement. We can really mitigate. So look forward to that presentation when it's finally scheduled.
Great, thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody here today. We were just talking with Dan about this, and we'll look to schedule something this fall on that. So keep an eye on your email box for that. Next one here is from Tom Reddy, who says, there's been very little reference today to the use of flex posts. Do you have a point of view on the use in conjunction with the road diet to further protect pedestrians and improve sight lines?
Yeah, and especially at intersections where we need to keep the sight lines open. Flex posts are a very valuable tool. There are a number of varieties of tools, not just flex poles, which are a specific design, that are good either as temporary or, in some cases, a long-term solution to rededicating space. They're not used as often with road diets, but they can certainly be used when we're going through the tactical urbanism aspects of the road diets, and they do open up the sightlines. So no, I'm a strong proponent that we use all the tools available to us that include flex posts.
Thanks, Dan. Here's one from Jeff Hoffman, who says, the term road diet is sometimes implied to oppose or prevent the expansion or improvement of roadways to prevent growth or seemingly reduce maintenance costs. Essentially, if we don't build it, perhaps they will not come. Can you provide your thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, tomato, potato. I like the term road diet. I mean, I did coin that term, but repurposing streets and some other terms can be used where a particular community doesn't have the vocabulary to use that word. So it doesn't matter what you call it. You're repurposing the streets. You're taking a lane out when it's not necessary, when it's only doing harm. So I'm certainly happy and flexible to work in communities using any term that's going to create buy-in at a higher rate.
Thanks, Dan. Here's an example from Jordan Pastorius, who says, we recently installed a median with landscaping and Z crosswalks in a middle turn lane with 2 lanes in one direction and 2 lanes in the opposite direction. What would you recommend saying or doing to respond to some community members' frustration with the left lane slowing down, with the possibility of rear end crashes when a vehicle is turning?
So we're talking about a multiple lane road, right? 2 lanes in each direction?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that any multiple lane road is going to be a tougher act. And with that crossing, you probably at the least need a rectangular rapid flash beacon that gets activated by the pedestrian. And if that's not enough to get motors to behave, then go to a hawk signal, which is a true signal head. It's done mid-block. It doesn't do anything to benefit the motorist. It's really to get the pedestrian across the street when the motorists aren't behaving on a multiple lane road. And there are a lot of roads that could benefit from a hawk system. So look at the volume, the speed, and some of the other characteristics to figure out whether an RRFB, rectangular rapid flash beacon, or the higher level, the hawk, is needed. Phoenix, Arizona already has, I believe it's 83 hawk signals. And they've had to because they built so many roads so wide and so fast that they needed full control. So those are 2 of the tools that should be looked at as opposed to not using either system. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Here's a more general question. That is, and from Paul Mikowitz, who asks, if they have so many positive benefits, what is the greatest impediment to towns and counties adopting road diets?
Well, I think really it's the lack of understanding. I always recommend to communities start with your certain successes first and have that that you can then apply as you gradually work up to higher volumes. And I think the main thing is every community to reclaim their cities for their people and for place, they need to figure out the right strategy to move forward. And when we work with communities, that's what we're looking for is how do we get things on the ground and not go for the big win right away, but to work up to it. It's just good strategy to start with roads that have the kinds of volumes or a horrible safety record. We once worked on a major road in New York State, I think it was Long Island 28, where they had just lost one of their great heroes in the wars. He was young and it was just a horrific loss. So they were looking at doing a road diet on a street where it wouldn't really work unless some of the side street traffic would absorb some of the spillover. I believe they put it in, and but it was just so sad that we had to wait for that kind of a tragedy before we could get enough local strength to put in that tool.
Thanks, Dan. Here's one from Brian Reynolds, and that I guess maybe in somewhat keeping with where you ended with your last response, which is these are great success stories, but there are also some road diet failures to learn from as well. And there are some examples where the motoring and commuter public revolted against bike lanes and sidewalks when travel times increased dramatically and redevelopment and streetscape benefits don't occur. Have you any lessons from failures?
Yes. Iowa did a really good study. They had 3 failures after many successes. Having 3 failures is not bad. But in each case, they went and they analyzed why those diets got the backlash. In one case, it was they didn't really properly analyze the transit stoppage, how long it would take and what the backup would be. Had they just done a little more analysis, they would have, before they built it, they would have figured out the right engineering solution, do an inset for the transit whatever it would take. And the other two that they had, it's been a while since I've read the study, but go to Iowa road diets, and I think you'll find the study. But those cases where they don't work are so rare that, and to me, it's all in, again, in the engagement process. If you do a proper engagement, now the engineer doesn't have to take the flak. It's the neighborhood who justifies and will defend their choice of tools for their neighborhood, and again, get the person who has the long commute to no longer be in control of harming the quality of life of those who are choosing to live in an urban space in order for them to get home a minute earlier, right? And again, most road diets don't slow the motors down in terms of their trip time, especially when you start to use the other tools with the road diet. Yeah. Great question.
Thanks, Dan. We'll do a few more. We may probably go over 5-10 minutes just to get to the volume of questions. That only scratched the surface, to be honest, in what was submitted here. And thanks to everybody for doing so. The next one here is from Ness Pringle, who says, what are some of the more effective ways that you have seen for mediating bus and public transit conflicts with bike lanes? In my city, buses pull into the bike lane. And what are the pros and cons of the various conflict mediation tactics?
Yeah, it depends on the volume of buses. If you're only going to get one bus line and maybe every 30 minutes, that's not bad. And I know that when I was bicycling to college all the time, I would deal really well with the buses. They learned who I was. I learned who they were. I knew the drivers by sight. But if you get into the higher volumes, then it's really good if first you put all the bus drivers through a training course to learn how to share the road correctly. And so each case is specific, but the more bicyclists you have, the more buses you have in combination, the more you should be looking at how to do inset parking or whatever's going to be the right set of tools. That's worthy of a presentation all to itself on, and I suspect that that's already been assembled by others. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dan. This one is from Kaylin Jones, who says, what do you think of the use of sharrows versus bike lanes, especially in the case of designs like Lancaster's, where the parking was prioritized and the observed speeds were quite low?
Mm-hmm. Sharrows are a last resort in my mind. When you have really low speeds, low volumes, sharrows can be useful to further designate that bicyclists you're sharing the space with bicyclists, and that's official. But once you get into higher volumes of traffic and higher speeds, sharrows are not the right tool. It's a cop-out. And so communities should be looking first and foremost of selecting the right tool. And it's only in certain select locations where sharrows have much value. They were way overbuilt in quite a number of communities.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Jeff spoke with us about sharrows last year in this early 2020 webinar that folks may want to look at, that was done with Jarrett Walker. Next question here is from Colby Lancelin, who asks, what about capturing fuel efficiency improvement as another key performance indicator or economic metric for implementing road diets?
I think that would be great. And again, what we're trying to do is to build a full system, multimodal system, where a great number of people would get out and ride their bikes or walk or use walking in transit or biking in transit in combination. And the better designed our systems that include road diets, getting back to what the road should have never been beyond, right, is going to allow far greater fuel efficiencies. And so that's one of many compelling reasons to consider road diets is to come up with a more balanced transportation system and to allow people who live in an urban area especially to now feel comfortable by using a street that's rightly built, sized, scaled, and operated for all people.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Next one here is from Sarah Allen, who notes that in 2021, pedestrian deaths were at the highest number in 40 years, and people of color are more likely to die while walking than any other group. How can we take steps to address walking fatalities in underserved communities? It can be difficult to build support for larger interventions in areas that are not bustling business districts or neighborhoods with high tax values. Do you have any examples of communities who have tackled this creatively to build support or respond to the distinct needs of a disinvested community?
We have too few model communities that have done a great job of that. Many are striving to, working around the edges, but we need to keep in mind that when we built wide, higher speed roads to get people from downtowns out to the burbs, we cut through communities of color before we built any others. And we've got a lot of face saving to do as planners, engineers, anyone who works with neighborhood development needs to be focused on. Which, if I were doing a road diet and I knew this is a neighborhood that we had really dissected, I'd put that on first consideration. I really would. We have so much that, and in fact, maybe that's an additional reason why we can justify the road diet. That, look, we never should have widened the road through these neighborhoods or this person's place of life. They can't get to their transit safely. They can't get to a store safely because of having widened this road. So I would put my first strong efforts into those communities that got abused, and they typically are in that first ring of suburbs or of neighborhoods out from the center of a urban area.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks to everybody for submitting these questions. It's, as you can see, covered a lot of different angles of this issue, both from the technical side, policy side, as well as the equity side. So I'm going to move to another area, which is from Will Kearns, who asks, can you discuss the best practices for snow storage and removal for road diets?
Oh, okay. Well, when we do a road diet, if we still pay attention to the turning movements, then we can store the snow safely in that center area, keeping open the turning pockets, right? Snow, there's so many different ways to remove snow from a road, but to have to plow the road constantly is a huge cost. And so when we do snow removal, I know that some communities will plow the snow toward the center. So if that's what we're going to do and still keep open the turning pockets and later come in with the heavier equipment and take the snow somewhere else, that's a pretty good consideration. I hope I'm answering that question fully. But it's an additional tool, and I hadn't thought about that value in terms of keeping the traffic lanes clear, but it would be. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, that comes up in various things depending on the type of interventions we're talking about from a planning standpoint. Next one here is, what are the determinants for putting bike lanes protected by parking spaces to their left? My perception is that this is widely adopted in Europe.
In fact, I was looking at some photos from Europe just today to find a photo to drop in here. Yeah, Europe is so far ahead of us on so many categories. One thing I mentioned earlier in the presentation, but lost the visual that I was looking for, is in Madrid, and I think also in Barcelona, one of the things they've done on multi-lane roads is they've designated outer lanes for 30-kilometer-per-hour speeds. That is, you cannot go faster than 30. In fact, you can't even be in that lane unless you're a taxi, a bicyclist, or a bus. So by bringing it down to 30 kilometers, which is 20 miles per hour, they're operating the outer lanes in the most safe fashion that they can, allowing the higher speed movement to be in the centermost lanes. I would love to see that tool developed for our country and model it in a couple of communities and figure out what type of systems are needed to make that workable. But Madrid and Barcelona are both doing these slow lanes on multiple lane roads, and I think with good effect. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be seeing them expanding that concept. But that's a great area for research. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. The next one here is not a question, but it's a comment from John Weddleton, and I'll read it to you and give you a chance to respond. And that it starts with a quote, which is, "Hell is frozen over. I love the new road design. I got this note from an aggressive opponent after completion of a road diet over 15 years in the making. 6 years after rebuilding the North Spencer Road in Anchorage, Alaska, the road works great and businesses are improving their looks and sales are great. Dan came to Anchorage and inspired many of us to continue the effort. We are now finishing the change with another section of the road. Thanks, Dan."
Oh, how nice. Well, I just think that some towns are just looking for a tipping point, right? And sometimes it's the most subtle shift of care to bring speeds down, to build our communities for people and businesses again. I'm always pleased to hear of such success stories. How nice. Thank you.
Thanks. And we will pass along all the questions and comments to Dan, so he'll be able to look at them afterward because we won't be able to get to them all. I guess we'll ask one more question and then wrap up. And this one's from Harry Dill, who asks, how does the trucking route with a 10-foot wide lane work with tractor trailers turning right onto a perpendicular street without popping the curb?
Right. Well, engineers don't want to make a mistake. And so when they design anything like a turning movement by a very big vehicle off the road, they're going to make sure that they can get onto that side street one way or the other. If the side street has low volumes, the standards allow for that truck driver to go over the center line. If the volumes are higher, then the particular intersection has to be wider to accommodate that turn. But that's the great reason why engineers are so skilled at using their truck turning templates to make sure that they don't make that big mistake. Again, if the volumes are light on the side street, then the big truck drivers are accommodated, but they do go over the center line. Even if the motorist who might be coming out has to be turning first, that dance occurs in so many cities in America, and we've been overbuilding those side streets with very sad effects. In fact, a good friend, neighbor of mine, her home was flooded because the side street, 60 feet wide of pavement, when it only needs to be maybe 26 or 28 feet at most. And so we need to be paying attention and not overbuilding anything. And whether it's a road diet or it's any other engineering location, then we shouldn't be overbuilding. We've made so many mistakes, and it's time to own up to that and start to correct these errors.
It's a good point. So with that, I think we'll close the question and answer period. And again, thanks to everybody for submitting those. But we did want to give you a last chance, Dan, to give us some takeaways from what we heard today from you.
Sure. Well, road diets are just one tool in the toolbox, but we have no opportunity for doing that in the small town I live in, population 10,000, Fort Townsend, Washington, because we don't have any multi-lane roads, which is good. And so when I work in a town, the first thing I'm looking for is what are some easy wins? And in almost any case, just taking the opportunity the next time you repaint, paint the correct number of lanes, but do the right public engagement first. I got into this whole field because I realized it wasn't the technical knowledge that would win over America to a better place focused on people. It was really getting people to understand and work together and not to be against things, but for things, to know what you're for and to then work toward that. And so road diets, one of my top favorites, along with roundabouts, very powerful. I've so rarely been to a town where we can't bring the kind of changes and have the right model projects to set a different course for our future, to now think about people and place as opposed to regional traffic and speed. It's just the wrong direction. Good news, engineers are being given more and more rationale and support for doing the right thing. And so whether you're an advocate, a planner, elected leader, this is the greatest time to be alive. We can now start to rescue cities in profound ways. And thanks for this opportunity. I just love the Smart Growth Network, what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. And we did get a lot of questions as well about roundabouts, and I encourage everybody to look at the webinar that we did with Dan in May. You can see what he presented then. I think the two definitely fit together well. So with that, thank you very much, Dan. All right, with that, we're going to conclude our webinar today, Designing Road Diets as a Tool for Walkability and Community Revitalization. I'd like to offer a giant thank you to Dan Burton for a great presentation, to everyone who attended today, and to John Coleman, our communications and technology guru, who helps to make this all happen. The complete recording of today's webinar will be posted on smartgrowth.org. Also, for those of you who have requested one, all attendees will receive an email that will contain a link to a personalized certificate of participation. Please look for this follow-up email if you need this certificate to claim other continuing education credits. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be asked to participate in a short evaluation. Please take a few moments to provide feedback so that we can continue to improve the webinar experience for you. And finally, keep an eye on smartgrowth.org and your email inbox for details on other future webinars. We have other programs in the queue, and we'll be sending out information on that in the coming days. Thank you for being with us today.